Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't even looking at Benny. He gives me a 3-2-1, and I was just looking down. Good morning. Welcome to Connection, coming to you from Spirit and Truth Sanctuary. We're going to begin, as we always do, with our morning blessing. Spirit of Truth, we give thanks to you today for our connection in this time of togetherness, for our sameness as well as our contrast, and for the light we reflect to one another and see in one another. We give thanks for the holy that holds us and for the humanity that always brings us back to the holy. We ask that our happiness, our peace, and our joy now be woven into the fabric of the world around us, and that it serve as nourishment to feed the heart of the collective in the name and nature of the Christ. Amen, and so it is. Okay, to our quotes. The first one from Leo Tolstoy. The two most powerful warriors are patience and time. Next, time is a storm in which we are all lost. William Carlos Williams. Next, from William Penn. Time is what we want most, but what we use worst. Okay, next, time is like a river. You cannot touch the same water twice because the flow that has passed will never pass again. Enjoy every moment in life. Okay, next by Michael Altshuler. The bad news is time flies. The good news is you're the pilot. And lastly, a short little series of quotes from the late Steve Jobs. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most importantly, have the courage to follow your own heart and your own intuition. Okay, so today, as may have already become obvious to you, we're going to talk a little bit about time, at least at first. And then we'll segue into something else. But I want to begin with the concept of time because, as Bob Dylan so wisely reminded us back in the mid-'60s with a very famous song of his, for the times they are a-changin', and indeed they are. On Sunday, we as a spiritual community celebrated 30 years of my brother being in ministry, and so that started me thinking about time. In his message, he gave us 7 of the lessons he had learned over the course of those 30 years, and one of them was to stay open. And that's an important one for all of us to learn because as we get older and as more time passes, unfortunately, a lot of people start closing down. This is something I've noticed happening over and over. They allow their world to just get smaller and smaller in scope. They get extremely set in their ways. They don't want to try anything different than the brands that they're already used to. They stop putting any effort into learning new things or meeting new people. They tell the same old stories again and again. So it's just logical that once your mind gets into that pattern, your body will soon follow and will start shutting down as well. Now, this isn't only as we get older. That's also a fear response. It's a fear response to contract, to go in and make everything smaller. Now, going in one way is good, going into yourself, meditation, etc. But you know what I'm talking about, the difference. Contracting when you're afraid is something else that happens as a consequence. But that doesn't have to be the case. We used to sing an old Amy Grant song in the early 80s. I think you'll remember this, Benny. The lyrics were, "Are you sitting in an old man's rubble? Are you listening to the father of lies?" Now, time out. Of course, back then we felt the need to have a physical devil to be the father of lies. But even though we don't believe that way anymore, the point of the song is still valid. Anytime you listen to or believe lies, anytime your belief system is built on things that are no longer true or perhaps were never true, it's just like sitting in rubble. It's not a solid foundation. The rest of the lyrics, well, let me start back over so you can hear all of it together. Are you sitting in an old man's rubble? Are you listening to the father of lies? If you are, then you're headed for trouble. If you listen too long, you'll eventually die. So if you try to hang on to beliefs that no longer serve you, that are no longer based in truth, if you allow your world to just get smaller and smaller and don't remain open to new things, then that is going to lead to death, either physically or spiritually / psychologically. We're going to talk today about remaining open to change on the micro level in our individual lives, as well as on the macro level, what's happening out in the wider world, and how there are pockets of people in our society right now who are sitting in the rubble of a culture that is passing away, that's shifting into something completely new. And if they don't let go and open up their minds a little, they're going to just be left sitting in the rubble. Okay, so we were going through a pretty radical shift about 50 or so years ago when that Bob Dylan song that I mentioned a few minutes ago was written, For the Times They Are A-Changin'. And we've just gone through another even bigger and more radical, in my opinion, shift over the last couple of years. We were just in the beginning phases of it back then, and I'm sure everyone can guess what I'm talking about because I talk about it a lot, that shift from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. Another popular song by that name was written and recorded around that same time, the same decade in 1969. And as I said, that was just the very beginning, the dawn. It's even in the lyrics. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And it's taken the entire second half of the 20th century and the first couple of decades of the 21st century to come to its completion. But we are now on the other side of it, in my opinion at least. As they say, opinions may vary. But for the most part, I think we've come through the major turning point and are now emerging into this new age of Aquarius fully. And as with anything new, we're going to have to spend a little time acquainting ourselves with how things work now in this new age, because the things that were once familiar to us have quite literally shifted. It's not just a metaphor or some far-off future event to talk about anymore. We, to quote one more song from that period by David Bowie, we must, see if you know this one, my brother, turn and face the strange changes. Okay. That's right. Okay, so we're going to have to turn and face the changes because the old order, the old age, the old way of doing things has forever collapsed, at least on an energetic level. And now humanity is trying to catch up with that energetic shift that's already occurred. So as I just said, those have not yet awakened may still be sitting in the rubble and in the ashes of the old crumbling system, trying as best they can to build it back the way it used to be. But it's not going to happen because you can't build anything with ashes. All they do when you try to pick them up is just slip through your fingers, and they get blown away and cleared out with the first strong wind. So I've read to you before from one of my very favorite books, which just happens to be about this subject, called The Dance of Time. And we're going to read from it again today. And I love, 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 love the poetic language of this book. We tend to think that the way we see things and the way that we experience time and live our lives according to the concept we now have of time is the way people have always viewed it and lived their lives, by the clock, as we do. But the concept of time and how we measure it is far from stable. In fact, it has changed quite a bit over the centuries. So I'm going to invite you now to join me in the world of beautiful poetic language as we read a little bit about the changing nature of this thing we call time. It says, the flowing river of time, carrying us from inception to eternity, is both invention and illusion, a phantom child of mortal dreams and fears. So the scientists tell us. They assure us that velocity can stretch time like wool spun on a rod, and that relativity makes time merely another variable in a host of equations whirling around the universe. Certainly our time, Western time, the spliced and segregated seconds, minutes, and hours by which we regulate our busy lives, was an invention of the late Middle Ages. Before then, time was measured naturally, and by those things of which it was made, the sun, the moon, and the stars. Revolving watches of sleepy soldiers, human town criers at dawn, cattle lowing in the evening, and of course by church bells tolling, roosters crowing, and sand running through an hourglass. In ancient days, the world itself served as a vast clock. People closely watched the seasons change. Winter thawed into spring, which warmed into summer. Summer surrendered to cool autumn until the first freeze of winter descended and the cycle began again. The heavens kept time with the earth. The sun dependably marked off each day's hours as it journeyed westward across the sky. All nature obeyed the dictates of cyclical time. Although life was shorter, meaning people generally did not live as long then as they do today, time was longer, moving with the steady but unhurried sun from one season to the next, changing in increments with the moon, wheeling with the great circle of the stars. Now, the next part I'll read is about when everything started to change and when we began to look at time differently, more linear and less cyclical. Then, around 1350, carefully stowed beneath the decks of trading ships, the first mechanical clocks arrived in Europe. Modern time made its debut and changed its creators. Now, it's interesting to note there that the way this is worded says that we, humans, are the ones that created time, this kind of time. Clock time, we created it. It's not something that naturally exists to count seconds and minutes. Time that was measured in much smaller increments than ever before. We've gone now from measuring years by the 4 seasons, which we determine by the sun and how close to or far away the earth is from it, to months, which are measured by the movements of the moon, to hours and seconds and minutes and seconds, which are now determined by a mechanical device called a clock. There was a time when clocks did not exist and there was no concept of such things as minutes or seconds. Seems unimaginable to all of us who are alive today. Okay, so now we're going to move on from clocks to another tool that we use for measuring time, the calendar. Again, today we think of the calendar as something very stable and unchanging, which contributes, I think, to this idea that we have that time waits for no one, and that the concept that we have now of time is some sort of absolute constant that has always been and will forever be the same, but that's not the truth. Our concept of time has changed drastically over and over. So to prove that, let's go back to the book one more time. Roman legend attributes the first calendar to Romulus, the founder of Rome. Like most ancient calendars, it was based on cycles of the moon and presented a year with only 10 months, beginning with March, which coincided with the vernal equinox, and Romans celebrated this as their new year. So you see, huge change already. The year used to begin on March the 1st, not January 1st. 6 of the months had 30 days and 4 had 31, totaling a year of 304 days. See, we think that it's always been 365. No, 61 days shorter than we now consider an actual solar year. The Romans made up for this gap by means of a macabre, I love that word, custom, it means gruesome. Rather than proceeding to March after the official year ended in December, they inserted 60 days into the calendar, 2 months of January and February, the coldest and darkest of the year, where the whole world was considered dead. These days bore no name and no numbers. 60 nameless days, a custom and concept almost inconceivable to the modern mind. Now, I wonder how they had to have some numbers to know that it was 60 days, but they didn't put them on a calendar as anything. This period of time was literally outside of time. It was called time outside of time and was given to private worship and meditation. Now, before you start thinking, oh, wow, how much more enlightened they were back then than we are today. They set aside 2 whole months just for prayer and meditation. That wasn't the whole story. The other element of these nameless days was fear. The book says the Romans lived in fear of horrible beings known as lemures, the ghost of the unhappy dead, purveyors of pestilence and death, witherers of fields, and blood drinkers, or vampires. They were thought to be the most prevalent at this particular time of the year. So during these 60 days, the Romans roamed the streets covered in ashes and purified themselves by leaping through sacred fires to avoid the contagion of the vengeful dead. So basically, they were already afraid of a zombie apocalypse back in ancient Rome. except for them, it could potentially happen every year during these 60 days. And so they performed all these rituals based on superstitions to keep themselves safe and their land and crops from being destroyed. And that was a large part of what these 60 days was dedicated to. So finally, just how to show you how inconsistent our calendar and our concept of time has been over the years, I want to read one final passage. Under the rule of Julius Caesar, 67 days were added to the calendar, resulting in the year 44 BC, called the long year, lasting 432 days, to catch the calendar up with the new calculations related to the solar year. This is when the 365-day calendar began, but calculations were still off by 11 minutes per year, which might not seem to amount to much until it had been in progress for several millennia, over which time the date of the equinox was pulled all the way back to January 1st, and that's why we still celebrate the new year at January 1st. It took civilization all the way until 1582 to reform this wayward calendar, to restore the civil year to a correspondence with the astronomical year. Pope Gregory XIII lopped 9 days out of the calendar and declared October 5th, 1582 to be October 15th. So the Pope just said, okay, tomorrow's not the October the 5th, it's the 15th. He just cut those days out of the calendar. To ensure that the year would continue to keep up with the sun, he also decreed that every year, and I'm not going to go into the details of this, but he's the one who started leap year, which is how we now stay on track, that every fourth year has that extra day in February. So then the book goes on in some detail, which again I will spare you, about how many years it took for all the different countries to adopt this new system. It was a long time. So for thousands more years after that, different parts of the world had different dates, not only because they were in different time zones, but because it took them that long to all get on the same calendar. So why did I just go through all that? First, as I said, I just wanted to read some of that beautiful language because it is so poetic, but mostly because I wanted to impress upon you that even the concept of time, which we have come to view as something that is so solid and unchanging and rigid, really doesn't exist. And once we can get our heads around how many shifts and changes have taken place in the past regarding time itself and our perception of it, it becomes a little easier for us to begin accepting this current shift that we're experiencing right now. There's a lot of new stuff, but it's very scary to us because it's been the way it's been for so long. But I wanted to show you that before this age started, things were not stable. These big shifts have occurred before. So one more little homage to poetic language in the form of a song. These lyrics, written in 1969 by Bob Dylan, but still infinitely relevant today. See if you can, when you listen to this, if you can hear some present day things still that we still are experiencing from 1969 in 2022. Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown. And accept that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing. Come, senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall. For he that gets hurt will be he who has stalled. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It will soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are a-changing. Come, mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you don't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand, for the times they are a-changing. So basically, if you're not going to shift into this new age, he's saying, if you're not going to lend a helping hand and make it easier for the generation coming behind you, then just get out of the way and let the young people, or the ones who have a young mindset, who want to leave behind the old system of gridlock and duality and bickering and fighting, let them lead the way now into this new age. So let's bring it down to the personal level now. How do we do this? How do we as individuals move with the changing times? Like he said, swim so that we don't sink like a stone, rather than try to fight against them. In our discussion earlier, we talked about the calendar, and we found out that the beginning of the year used to be in springtime, specifically at the vernal equinox, which signals the beginning of spring. This is typically in late March or early April, and it's why we celebrate Easter when we do. Yes, the festival of celebrating the resurrection of Jesus coincides with the pagan celebration of the resurrection of the earth and back to life, all the plant life coming back after the cold death of winter. Surprise, surprise, that was not created by Christians. In astrological terms, this is the beginning of Aries season, which is the first sign of the zodiac, and it's a fire sign, known for its aggressive forward motion. It's a sign full of energy, and it likes to get things done. I was listening to a lady talk about this the other day. Her name is Molly McCord, and I was finding what she was saying about the energy we're currently in syncing up with some thoughts I had about this shift we're also experiencing into the new age of Aquarius. So I want to read you some excerpts from her talk, because I think some of the concepts she's highlighting here are exactly what we need to be doing, as I said earlier, in order to change with the times and not get left behind, sitting in the ashes and the rubble, trying to rebuild a way of life that's never coming back. And one of these concepts she's talking about is something she calls traveling with your own energy, as opposed to absorbing the energy from the environment around you. She says, one of the major ways I believe we are and have been shifting for a while now is from this world view of getting our information and creating our entire belief system from authority figures or needing savior figures, whether it's the government or pastors or gurus or kings or queens, dictators, experts, etc. This top-down style of rulership is not a characteristic of the new age. That is part of the system that has passed away. Now we are realizing and recognizing our own divinity, our own Christ consciousness, and we're learning to connect with spirit, with source for ourselves in our own way. We're learning to find and to live our own truth, and not just rely on what some spiritual leader way up above us tells us to believe. One of the shifts we're making is from religion, which, if you've been around here for very long, my brother says just about every chance he gets, tells you what to think, to spirituality, which teaches you how to think. Another thing he says pretty often is that a true spiritual teacher has nothing to teach you, but rather just helps you remove the obstacles to all the truth that is already inside you. You already have all the answers you need. Sometimes you just need someone to help you find them, but that's different from someone giving you an answer. So that's what she's talking about here when she refers to traveling with your own energy. She says you always travel with your own energy. You travel with everything you create, with what you believe, with what you focus on. It goes with you. And as things are transitioning, you are being given a beautiful opportunity to remember that what you want in life will always travel with you. Those dreams you have, those desires, those goals, those things that are really important to you, what your values are, what matters to you, all of that is resident within your own energy field and travels with you. Let's say you had a dream that was connected with someone else or connected to a specific job, role, or situation that no longer exists for some reason. That dream still travels with you. That is still in your realm of creation, even if the shape of it shifts and changes. Even if it shows up in a different form, it's not dependent on anything else that's outside of you. Now, I want to stop right here and insert this. Back before 2020, there was a lot of people who did not believe you could have a relationship with God, or that it was beneficial at all to not be in a church building every Sunday. But what did we find out? We found out that life could go on. We could still connect with each other, and we could still connect with God virtually in other ways. So that's one of the things that she's saying, that energy is always within you. It's not in the form we've become used to. She said, if it's still resonating with you, you get to choose how long and how far you will carry it. Even if something you've created gets destroyed by someone else or a change in circumstance, you still have at your disposal all the building material you used to build it originally, and you can rebuild it anytime you want. No one limits your ability to create but you. So if you can embody that intention during this major shift, It will serve to restore your trust in yourself and empower you to take ownership of your own energy. If during this shift you have felt like you lost a dream or a significant connection or relationship, maybe you're in the midst of figuring out a new career path. Keep in mind that the universe is always creating along with you and that you are not alone, no matter who you feel has left you. Keep your energy focused on what you want to create and to build, and do something that will ground that energy, like writing it down somewhere. Making something visual and then putting it somewhere you see it regularly can be a vital part of the manifestation process. So, time out. What's she describing here? Bringing what's in our imagination into manifestation. And what she's saying is, look, we've all just been through a major shift. Like I was talking about earlier, the entire system we've been used to working within is in the process of crumbling. A big part of that system was relying on external circumstances and people and resources to make your dream a reality. And the energetic shift she's trying to explain here is that that's no longer the case. We no longer need to rely on things outside ourselves to fulfill our dreams. Our energy, our ability to create and plug into source to bring what is in our imagination into manifestation travels with us always, no matter what. That's the way it works in the new age. All right, so thank you, Miss Molly. Now on to one of our other favorites, Dr. Kim Duramo, for even more on this subject of shifting from relying on things that are outside of us to learning to trust our own inner wisdom. Dr. Kim says, right now we're at a time when there are a lot of things surfacing that seem really important, like, what should I do about this? Or should I do that thing? And they seem like really intense life or death decisions. To answer these, it's time to begin to connect with our own inner wisdom instead of continuing to look outside of ourselves for information. We now have the science to show that what we think directly impacts our cells in a very significant way, and that our cells actually have the ability to think and to retain memory. They have what we call cellular memory of programming that we've bought into. Programming that says things like, you're not good enough. You're going to always have to keep working harder and harder. Or things like, as you age, your health is going to fall apart. Or things like, you can't make money doing this thing that you love. You have to do this thing over here that you actually hate doing. There are thousands of statements like that in the form of these mental programs. And whether you're consciously aware of it or not, your cells have been programmed to send these kind of messages. As a doctor, I have seen that this is really detrimental to our health because the program will cause the cells to age, die, develop cancer, and generally hold us back in all kinds of negative ways through affecting the way that we think and the way that we see reality. So what I want to share with you today is how to consult your own inner wisdom in order to make the important choices that will assist you in increasing your level of health, vitality, well-being, ease, serenity, and abundance in each moment of every day. So how do we let go of the programming in our cellular memory and connect to the wisdom that comes from the same life force that created us? That divine intelligence that goes so far beyond anything that's ever been written in any medical textbook in the history of humanity that it can do things like heal pain and reverse aging and disease and rearrange our immune system to create health. Instead of always looking outside ourselves for the answers, how do we tune in to this wisdom? And then she gives an example of a patient of hers who feels confused and bombarded and overwhelmed by all the conflicting information she gets when she tries to go online or read books and do research about this particular disease that she has. She says all it's doing is creating fear within this woman because she has listened to all this contrasting information. Like when she looks up a particular medicine, one source will say, don't take this, it will kill you. And then another source basically says, you'll die if you don't take this. And all of the fear this kind of information is producing in her is going straight into her cells and being held there. So when she's in this fear frequency, how she feels moment to moment is being dictated by what's going on outside her because it's affecting what's going on inside her. Instead of that, if she would only learn to connect with the serenity inside herself, her well-being would be unconditional. Or, as I believe Molly McCord was just saying, she would understand that the greatest source of information about her and her own body travels with her inside the energy of her own body. Whether the decision you need to make is over a medical issue or another area in your life, there is a relatively easy way to tap into your own inner wisdom. It begins with how you ask the question. Often people will ask these questions in this form: should I? When you ask should questions, you're consulting the program, and your programming has lots of ideas about what you should or shouldn't do, which is all based on judgment. All this and this judgment is made up of finite information. Again, we're talking about keeping things small, created from what we've been taught, our past experiences, what we believe others will think of us, etc., and it's all coming from our mind. In other words, again, a small, closed place as opposed to an open, expansive place. Another thing that Dr. Kim always says that I love is when she's in a situation that she thinks is impossible, or other people are telling her is impossible, she always says to herself, what else is possible here? And she focuses on that and not what everybody is saying is impossible. It's also based on conclusions, either our own or ones we've heard from others. And when we come to a conclusion, we have shut down the possibility for anything new or different to happen. We have immediately limited our options. As soon as we accept a conclusion, we are getting only a micro-focused version of what someone else thinks is important. And if that conclusion is fear-based, we're constantly triggering and reinforcing all our negative programming. When this happens, our systems gets trained to ask questions like, how do I not die? How do I keep myself protected from this or from that? Instead of asking questions like, what will create the most for me today? What will create the most expansion in my relationships? What will create the most abundance in my business? What will be the most harmonizing for my health? Okay, so do you feel the difference between the energy of those two different ways of asking questions? One is going down the path of survival, of I just don't want to die because you're afraid of everything. But the other one is, so these kind of questions are down the survival road. These other kind of questions, what she's talking about, what else is possible? What would create the most abundance or health for me today? Those are open, expansive questions where you can thrive rather than just survive. So she says, what we've learned about the human energy system is that there are basically three functions. First, you are a giant receptor. You are receiving billions of bits of information in every moment. Secondly, you are a transmitter. Your body actually gives off electromagnetic information that the people around you can feel, and it can register physiological changes in their body. Did you know that? Like, do you know how sometimes you just feel good around certain people? When somebody walks in the room, they just bring health and happiness and joy with them, and you just feel good even standing next to them. It's because they're literally giving off joy vibes, love vibes. And then there are other people that walk in here and are like, oh my God, why are they here? Because they're giving off the opposite. Thirdly, you are a transmuter, meaning you have the ability to convert the energy from fear into love. You can convert shame into harmony. You can convert anger into appreciation. So let's go back to the first function of being a receptor. You have the choice of either tuning into and receiving the information of what will create the most for my health and my well-being today, or receiving the information of how do I protect myself from the dangers of the world today. These are two very different sets of information that will create two very different states of mind. And this goes beyond our health. Sometimes we are tuning into this information, to the information of questions like, how do I make sure my kids get into the best school? Or what can I do to prevent my business from failing? If we're constantly tuning into this level with the questions we're asking, which we've already determined is the level of the mind, then that's the level of answers we will receive. And that's where they will come from. The mind lives on a level of duality. So we're going to get a lot of conflicting, dualistic information. Just like the woman she was talking about looking up the medicine. If all you do is stay in your mind, which is smaller than your heart, than your spirit, then you're going to always be getting this conflicting information that's just going to confuse you, and you're not going to know which way to go. When we live on this level only, our receptors are full of the judgments, conclusions, and opinions of others, and we can get caught up in a never-ending obsession of making sure bad things don't happen. Only when you let all of that go and wipe the chalkboard clean can you tune into truth. And the only question you ask on this level is, what will create the most health, abundance, and harmony in this situation? The key is the questions we ask, because they determine the answers we are receptive to. Our bodies can only be receptive in the now moment. They cannot be receptive in, what was that thing I heard last year about X, Y, or Z? That's living in and trying to receive from the level of your mind. Here's another helpful hint. The truth will always feel light, and a lie will always feel heavy. No, you shouldn't do that. You should do this. That's also full of judgment and conclusions and programming, and that's why it feels heavy. I can't tell you what's true for you and what's not. I can only show you how to tune in so that you can have the answers for yourself. So, now Dr. Kim is sounding a whole lot like my brother here. I have nothing to teach you. I can only help you remove all the things that are blocking or keeping you from knowing the truth that's already inside you. And she's coming at it from a medical perspective. So you can come at this, whether you come at it from the spiritual perspective or the medical, it's the same. And that's the shift. That's how we live and function in this new age. That's how we move with the changing times, by remaining open and trusting that the wisdom of the Christ consciousness within us contains everything we need. We're coming out of the age where we needed an extreme, an external savior character in the form of a physical man that we call Jesus of Nazareth. We're leaving that age and coming into an age where we recognize the presence, that same presence of Christ that was in Jesus, in ourselves. The last thought I want to leave with you today is one that my brother wrote about in one of his books, and it's the idea that Christians, or people who consider themselves spiritual, not necessarily just Christians, but we say that we're interested in eternal things. We talk about and think about eternity a lot. For years, that's been the go-to question of Christian pastors. Do you know where you'll spend eternity? And eternity, by definition, is time that never ends. So what kind of sense does it make then to start defining our belief system, presumably the foundation from which we will make all of our life decisions, from conclusions, okay? If our belief system is full of these conclusions that are solid and rigid ideas that cannot be changed, such as there is only one name given in heaven and earth by which you will be saved, or there's only one door, etc., etc. So religion, not just Christianity, but all religions are full of conclusions that people have come to over the centuries of what they believe to be true about God. And what did we just read from Dr. Kim? These conclusions, which are based in judgment, 99% of the time someone else's judgment and not your own, are what has programmed your very cells. And these programs often cause physical disease and can lead to death. Why? Because, as she said, that's coming from the level of the mind, which is always going to give you conflicting information because the mind lives in duality. Conflicting information is disharmonious. That's what happens when we base anything on a conclusion that we've come to. Because, as my brother says, a conclusion is an ending. He wrote that in one of his books. And as I said earlier, once you come to a conclusion, you shut down all your other options, making your world smaller and smaller. So what's the alternative? Going within, not in a bad way, not contracting, but going within, remaining open, remembering that truth is a journey, not a destination, and connecting to that energy that travels with you wherever you go. It's not dependent on any other person or circumstance, because rather than being based in your mind, which is a very difficult place to find harmony, it's based in your heart, where there is only one thing, and that one thing is love. So, welcome to the age of Aquarius. And here is my brother with some further wisdom about shifting to the age of Aquarius.
I'll shift you. Hey, everybody's. Happy Tuesday. And I think that she had tried to kill me just now. What a powerful teaching. Yeah, open up some space. As LaDonna was speaking today, I was going through a few of my notes that I keep in my phone, and I found a prayer or kind of an affirmation that I think we'd repeated several years back, and it was so resonating with today's teaching. And so it said, "We are not absent-minded; we are empty-minded." Listen to that. We choose to clear out space today to allow God to create and recreate new thoughts, new perspectives, new narratives, new mindsets, new wine, and new wineskins. And so today we choose to clear out space, to open up, to drink the new wine, and to put that new wine into new wineskins. The wine is the thought. The wineskin is how we house that. We house it very loosely, knowing that each and every day there's a new thought that God will give us. Can you say amen to that? We hope you guys have a great week. We're looking forward to connecting with you again tomorrow night at 6:30, Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth, and then hopefully see everybody either in person or online virtually this Sunday. Have a great week. Be the change, be the love, be the peace, laugh, live, walk. Go see a movie. Do something that brings you joy this week. We want to be those people that LaDonna spoke about today, that when we come in their presence, something changes. The atmosphere, the love, even the way their bodies physically feel changes because of the way that we carry ourselves. Can you say amen to that? Amen. God, we thank you for this week. We give it to you now, knowing that each step is ordered, for it's in the name and nature of the Christ. Amen. And so it is. Go in peace. May God bless you.